They found his backpack. They never found him. He was carrying 2 GPS units, a satellite radio, and 30 years of survival training. None of it mattered. In the most remote wilderness areas of the United States, people disappear under circumstances that defy explanation. They are not inexperienced tourists who wandered off marked trails. They are not unprepared day hikers caught by unexpected weather. They are experts, professionals, people who have spent decades learning to survive in conditions that would kill an ordinary person in hours. And yet they vanish, without a trace, without explanation, without any evidence of what happened to them after they walked into the wilderness and did not walk out. This is the first of 3 cases we will examine in this series. 3 men, 3 wilderness areas, 3 disappearances that share disturbing similarities. In each case, the missing person was highly experienced in backcountry survival. In each case, extensive search operations found little or no evidence. In each case, the official investigation generated hundreds of pages of documentation and 0 explanations. In Part 1, we examine Ronald Scott Gray, a retired Marine and police captain who vanished during an elk hunt in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in 2008. He was carrying enough equipment to survive for weeks. Only his backpack was ever found. In Part 2, we examine Floyd Roberts III, a former wilderness ranger who disappeared in the western Grand Canyon in 2016. He knew that terrain better than almost anyone alive. The canyon erased every trace of his existence. In Part 3, we examine Hunter Fraser, an experienced backpacker who vanished in Olympic National Park in 2023. He was on a 40-mile route he had planned for months. He called to say he was fine. Then he was gone. 3 cases spanning 15 years, 3 wilderness areas separated by thousands of miles. 3 men who should have known better than to disappear. And yet all 3 are gone, leaving behind questions that no one has been able to answer. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from law enforcement investigation files, search and rescue reports, court documents, Freedom of Information Act releases, and interviews with family members, hunting companions, and the investigators who spent months trying to understand what happened to these men who walked into the wilderness and never walked out. The evidence is documented. The searches were thorough, and the missing remain missing. Ronald Scott Gray was not the kind of man who got lost. He was born on April 7, 1946, in Worcester, Massachusetts. He grew up in a working-class family, the son of a factory worker and a homemaker. He was a serious child, disciplined, focused on goals that most of his peers could not understand. While other teenagers were chasing girls and listening to rock and roll, Ronald Gray was studying maps and learning to navigate by compass and stars. He enlisted in the United States Marine Corps on his 18th birthday. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, including combat operations during the Tet Offensive in 1968. His service record, portions of which were obtained through FOIA requests, documents multiple commendations for valor and leadership under fire. He was promoted to sergeant before his 23rd birthday. After leaving the Marines in 1972, Gray joined the Massachusetts State Police. He rose through the ranks over the next 28 years, eventually becoming a captain in charge of a regional barracks. His personnel file describes him as methodical, thorough, and possessed of exceptional situational awareness. A colleague who served with him for 15 years told investigators, "Scott Gray was the most prepared person I have ever known. He planned for everything. He had contingencies for his contingencies. If you were going into a dangerous situation, you wanted Scott Gray at your side." Gray retired from the state police in 2000 at the age of 54. He had been planning his retirement for years. He intended to spend his remaining decades doing what he loved most, hunting in the most remote wilderness areas of the American West. He had been hunting since he was 12 years old. Over the decades, he had taken game in Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Idaho. He was a skilled tracker, an excellent shot, and an experienced backcountry navigator. He held certifications in wilderness first aid, avalanche safety, and search and rescue operations. He was, by any measure, one of the most capable outdoorsmen in the country. A hunting guide who had worked with Gray on 3 previous trips told researchers, "In 30 years of guiding, I have taken hundreds of clients into the backcountry. Most of them think they know what they are doing. A few of them actually do." Scott Gray was in a category of his own. He knew more about wilderness survival than most professional guides. He was physically fit, mentally sharp, and absolutely meticulous about preparation. If you had asked me to name the last person who would ever go missing in the wilderness, I would have said Scott Gray. In September of 2008, Ronald Scott Gray traveled to Idaho for what would be his final hunting trip. His destination was the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, a 1.3 million acre expanse of roadless terrain straddling the border of Idaho and Montana. It is one of the largest wilderness areas in the continental United States and one of the most remote. There are no maintained trails in large sections of the wilderness. There are no emergency services. A person in trouble in the Selway Bitterroot is entirely on their own. Gray had hunted the Selway Bitterroot twice before, in 2004 and 2006. He knew the terrain. He knew the challenges. He knew that this was not a place for the inexperienced or the unprepared. He arrived in Idaho on September 10th and met with his outfitter, a man named William Kessler, who operated a hunting guide service out of Hamilton, Montana. Kessler would provide pack horses to transport Gray and his equipment into the wilderness, then return on a prearranged date to bring him out. Kessler later provided detailed statements to investigators about Gray's preparation for the trip. He said, "Scott was the most prepared client I have ever had. His gear was immaculate. His pack weighed probably 90 to 100 pounds. He had enough food for 3 weeks. He had 2 GPS units, a handheld and a wrist-mounted. He had a satellite radio with a solar charging panel. He had maps and compasses as backup. He had a satellite messenger for emergencies. He had everything." Kessler continued, "I remember thinking that he was overprepared, which is not something I usually think. Most hunters do not bring enough gear. Scott brought too much. He had caches of food and batteries that he planned to stash at various points along his route. He said he liked having options. He liked knowing that no matter what happened, he had supplies waiting for him." The hunting party departed on September 12th. The group consisted of Gray and 3 other hunters: Michael Torrance, 58, a retired accountant from Boston; David Wellman, 45, a contractor from Portland; and James Holloway, 52, a veterinarian from Bozeman who had hunted with Gray twice before. Kessler and his assistant transported the group approximately 18 miles into the wilderness to a base camp near Highline Lake at an elevation of approximately 7,200 feet. The plan was for the hunters to spend 10 days in the area pursuing elk, then rendezvous with Kessler on September 23rd for extraction. The first week of the hunt proceeded without incident. The weather was good. The elk were active. Torrance took a bull on September 15th. Wellman took one on September 17th. Gray and Holloway continued hunting, hoping to fill their own tags. But members of the hunting party noticed that Gray was behaving strangely. James Holloway provided the most detailed account of Gray's behavior during the hunt. Scott was different on this trip. I had hunted with him twice before, in 2004 and 2006. Both times he was focused, methodical, completely in control. On this trip, he seemed distracted. He would stop in the middle of doing something and just stare at the trees. I asked him once what he was looking at. He said he thought he saw someone moving out there. I looked but did not see anything. Holloway continued. He also started sleeping away from camp. The first few nights, he slept with the rest of us around the fire. But starting on maybe the 4th or 5th night, he would take his sleeping bag and go off by himself, sometimes 100 yards or more from camp. I asked him why. He said the fire was too bright. He said he could hear better in the dark. Michael Torrance corroborated Holloway's account and added additional observations. One night, maybe the 6th night, I woke up around 2 in the morning. Scott was not in camp. I got up to check on him, thinking maybe he had gone to relieve himself. I found him about 200 feet from camp, standing in a clearing, just standing there in the dark. No flashlight, no weapon, just standing and staring up at the ridge above us. He continued. I called his name. He did not respond right away. I called again. Finally, he turned around. He looked confused, like he did not know where he was. I asked him what he was doing. He said he had heard something. He said it sounded like voices coming from the ridge. I listened, but did not hear anything. He said it stopped when I arrived. Torrance added a detail that has troubled researchers. When we walked back to camp, Scott grabbed my arm. He looked at me and said, "They have been watching us since we got here." I asked who he meant. He said, "I do not know, but they are out there. They have been out there every night." I did not know what to say. Scott was not the kind of person who said things like that. He was rational, practical, skeptical of anything he could not verify. For him to talk about someone watching us, it was not like him at all. David Wellman reported a separate incident from the 7th day of the hunt. I was hunting with Scott that morning, just the two of us. We were moving along a ridge when he suddenly stopped. He held up his hand for me to stop too. I thought maybe he had spotted elk, but he was not looking at the valley. He was looking back along the ridge, the way we had come. He continued. I asked what he saw. He said, "Someone is following us." I looked but did not see anyone. I glassed the ridge with my binoculars. Nothing. He stood there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just watching. Then he said, "They stopped. They do not want to be seen." I asked who he was talking about. He just shook his head and said we should keep moving. Wellman added, "Later that day, Scott told me something that I did not understand at the time." He said, "This is different from Vietnam, but it feels the same." I asked what he meant. He said, "In Vietnam, you always knew when someone was watching you. You could feel it. You could not see them, but you knew they were there. That is what this feels like, except this is not Vietnam. And I do not think these are people." On September 19th, Torrance, Wellman, and Holloway decided to leave the wilderness early. They had filled their tags and were concerned about Gray's increasingly erratic behavior. They urged Gray to leave with them. He refused. Holloway recounted the conversation. I told Scott that something was wrong. I told him he was not acting like himself. I told him we should all leave together. He said he was fine. He said he had not come all this way to leave without an elk. He said he knew these mountains. He said he would be at the extraction point on the 23rd, as planned. He continued. I did not want to leave him, but he was insistent, and Scott was not the kind of person you could argue with once he had made up his mind. We agreed that he would check in via satellite radio every evening. We agreed on the extraction point and time. I shook his hand and told him to be careful. That was the last time I saw him. Torrance, Wellman, and Holloway hiked out of the wilderness and met Kessler at the trailhead on September 20th. They informed him that Gray had stayed behind and would need extraction on the 23rd, as planned. Gray made one satellite radio check-in on the evening of September 19th. The transmission was brief. He reported that he was fine, that he was moving his camp to a new location, and that he expected to reach the extraction point on schedule. He did not check in on September 20th, or September 21st, or September 22nd. On September 23rd, William Kessler arrived at the extraction point. Ronald Scott Gray was not there. Kessler waited for 6 hours. He fired signal shots. He called out. There was no response. On September 24th, Kessler contacted the Idaho County Sheriff's Office to report Gray as missing. A search operation was initiated immediately. The search for Ronald Scott Gray was one of the most extensive ever conducted in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. Over the following 2 weeks, more than 100 personnel participated, including deputies from Idaho and Ravalli counties, volunteers from multiple search and rescue organizations, U.S. Forest Service rangers, and tracking specialists from as far away as Colorado. Aircraft flew grid patterns over hundreds of square miles of terrain. Ground teams searched every accessible drainage and ridgeline within a 15-mile radius of Gray's last known position. Tracking dogs were brought in. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed at night. On September 28th, searchers made their only significant discovery. A ground team found Gray's backpack. The pack was located approximately 3 miles northeast of the Highline Lake Base Camp, in a dense stand of timber near the bottom of a steep ravine. It was leaning against a tree, upright, as if someone had carefully placed it there. Search team leader Deputy William Crow documented the discovery in detail. The pack was intact. It appeared to have been deliberately placed against the tree, not dropped or discarded. The main compartment was closed and secured. Inside, we found food, clothing, a first aid kit, maps, and various survival equipment. The food caches Mr. Gray had prepared were inside, still sealed. He continued. What was missing was as significant as what we found. There was no GPS unit in the pack. There was no satellite radio. There was no satellite messenger. There was no weapon. There was no ammunition. These were items that Mr. Gray's companions confirmed he had been carrying. They should have been with the pack, or on his person. They were nowhere to be found. Deputy Crow added an observation that has never been explained. The pack weighed approximately 70 pounds when we recovered it. Mr. Gray had been carrying 90 to 100 pounds, according to his outfitter. That means approximately 20 to 30 pounds of equipment was missing, not counting his rifle and ammunition. Someone removed specific items from that pack. The food was left, the maps were left, the survival gear was left, but the navigation equipment, the communication equipment, and the weapon were taken. That is not random. That is selective. The area around the pack was searched intensively. Tracking dogs were brought to the scene. The results were troubling. A handler named Robert Martinez, working with a bloodhound named Duke, provided this account. Duke picked up Mr. Gray's scent immediately when we arrived at the pack. He tracked the scent approximately 40 feet uphill from the pack location. Then the scent stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I worked Duke in circles around that point for over an hour. He could not reacquire the trail in any direction. He continued. In my experience, scent trails do not simply end. They fade. They dissipate. But there is always something to follow, some indication of direction. This trail ended as if Mr. Gray had ceased to exist at that point. I have no explanation for it. In 22 years of tracking work, I have never encountered anything like it. The search continued for another 10 days without result. No additional evidence was found. No tracks. No clothing. No biological material. No sign of Gray's rifle, GPS units, radio, or any of the other equipment that was missing from his pack. Forensic analysts examined the backpack in detail. Their findings raised additional questions. A forensic technician named Dr. Patricia Valdez documented the condition of the pack and its contents. The pack shows no signs of animal interference. There are no claw marks, no tooth marks, no evidence that any predator attempted to access the contents. The zippers are intact and functional. The fabric is undamaged. If Mr. Gray had been attacked by a bear or mountain lion, we would expect to see damage to his equipment. There is none. She continued. The food inside the pack was untouched. There were sealed packages of jerky, trail mix, energy bars, and freeze-dried meals. None of them had been opened. If Mr. Gray had consumed food before abandoning the pack, there would be empty wrappers. There are none. If an animal had accessed the pack, the food would be disturbed. It was not. Dr. Valdez added an observation about the arrangement of items inside the pack. The contents were organized methodically. Clothing was rolled and stored in compression sacks. Food was grouped by type. Maps were in a waterproof sleeve. Everything was exactly as you would expect from someone who had packed with care. But there were gaps, spaces where items had been removed. The way the remaining contents shifted suggests that whoever removed the missing items did so carefully, without disturbing the overall organization. This was not someone frantically searching for something. This was deliberate, methodical removal of specific items. The missing items were cataloged based on what Gray's companions and outfitter confirmed he had been carrying. 1 Garmin GPS map, 62 handheld GPS unit, 1 Sunto wrist-mounted GPS, 1 DeLorme Reach satellite messenger, 1 satellite radio with solar charging panel, 1 Weatherby Mark V rifle in caliber .300 Winchester Magnum, approximately 40 rounds of ammunition in various configurations, 1 hunting knife, 1 headlamp, 2 sets of spare batteries. The total weight of missing equipment was estimated at 25 to 30 pounds, not counting the rifle, which weighed approximately 9 pounds. An investigator who reviewed the case file told researchers, "What we have here is a selective removal of specific categories of equipment: navigation, communication, weapons. Someone took the things that would allow Mr. Gray to know where he was, to call for help, and to defend himself, and they left everything else. I have been in law enforcement for 23 years. That is not the behavior of a person having a mental health crisis. That is the behavior of someone who knew exactly what they were doing." The search was officially suspended on October 8, 2008. The case was transitioned to limited continuing status, meaning that searchers would check the area periodically, but no dedicated resources would be assigned. In the years since Gray's disappearance, the area has been searched numerous times by family members, private investigators, and volunteers. Hunters and hikers who pass through the region have been asked to report any findings. Nothing has ever been found. Not his rifle, not his GPS units, not his radio, not his bones. After 16 years, Ronald Scott Gray remains as completely missing as he was on the day his companions realized he had not arrived at the extraction point. But there have been reports from the area that add additional layers to an already disturbing case. A hunter who was in the Selway Bitterroot in September of 2009, approximately 1 year after Gray's disappearance, reported an experience that he did not initially share with authorities. He came forward in 2014 after learning about the case through a documentary. The hunter, who requested anonymity, told researchers, "I was camped about 5 miles from Highline Lake. It was my 3rd night out. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of something moving through the brush outside my tent. I assumed it was an animal, maybe a bear. I grabbed my rifle and listened." He continued. "The movement stopped. Then I heard something I cannot explain. It sounded like voices, very faint, too faint to make out words, but definitely human voices, or something that sounded like human voices. They seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once. I stayed in my tent with my rifle, ready until dawn. When the sun came up, I searched the area around my camp. There were no tracks, no sign that anything had been there." He added, "I did not know about the Gray case at the time. When I learned about it years later, and read that he had been hearing voices before he disappeared, I felt sick. Whatever he heard, I think I heard it too. And I think if I had gone out of my tent to investigate, I might not be here to tell you about it." A second report came from a Forest Service ranger who patrolled the area in 2012. The ranger, who also requested anonymity, described finding something unusual approximately half a mile from where Gray's pack was discovered. "I found a clearing in the timber that did not look natural. The trees around it were intact, but there was a roughly circular area, maybe 15 feet across, where nothing was growing. No grass, no undergrowth, just bare dirt. The soil looked compacted, like something heavy had been resting there." He continued, "I took photographs and GPS coordinates. When I went back the following year, the clearing was gone, completely overgrown, like it had never been there. I checked my GPS. I was in the right location, but the clearing I had photographed did not exist anymore. I do not know how to explain that. Ronald Scott Gray was married to a woman named Barbara Gray for 34 years. They had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, all adults at the time of his disappearance. Barbara died in 2019 without ever learning what happened to her husband. In an interview conducted 6 months before her death, Barbara shared details about her final conversation with her husband. "Scott called me on September 18th, the day before his companions left. He sounded different, distracted. I asked if he was all right. He said yes. Then he said something that did not make sense at the time. He said, 'This place remembers things.' I asked what he meant. He said, 'I do not know how to explain it, but there is something here that has been here a long time, something that watches.' I thought maybe he was tired, or maybe the altitude was affecting him. I told him to be careful. He said he loved me. That was the last time I heard his voice." Barbara continued, "After he disappeared, I went through his things. I found a notebook in his desk at home. He had been keeping notes about his previous trips to the Selway Bitterroot. In the notes from 2006, there was an entry that I had never seen before. It said, 'Heard them again tonight. 3rd night in a row. Moving through the trees, always just out of sight.' M thinks I am imagining things. I am not." She added, "M was Michael Torrance. He was on that 2006 trip too." When I asked Michael about it later, he said he did not remember Scott mentioning anything like that. But Scott wrote it down. He wrote it in his notebook, where no one would see it unless they were looking. My husband heard those things before, and he went back anyway. I have never understood why. Their eldest son, Scott Gray Jr., has continued the search for answers. He has visited the Selway Bitterroot 5 times since his father's disappearance, most recently in 2022. He has obtained documents through FOIA requests. He has interviewed members of the search team. He has spoken to researchers who study unexplained disappearances. In an interview conducted in 2023, Scott Jr. described his efforts to understand what happened to his father. "My father was not the kind of man who made mistakes. He planned. He prepared. He had backups for his backups. For him to disappear without a trace, leaving his pack behind, but taking his navigation and communication equipment. It does not fit any scenario I can imagine. He continued, "What bothers me most is what his hunting companions told me about his behavior. My father was a Vietnam veteran. He saw combat. He experienced things that stayed with him his whole life. But he was not the kind of person who talked about hearing voices or feeling watched. He was practical, rational. For him to say those things in the days before he disappeared, it was not like him. Something was happening to him out there. Something changed him." Scott Jr. obtained one document through his FOIA requests that has never been publicly discussed. It is a report from a military psychologist who reviewed the case at the request of the VA, which was processing a claim related to Gray's veteran status. The report states, based on witness accounts of Mr. Gray's behavior in the days preceding his disappearance, it is possible that he was experiencing symptoms consistent with combat-related PTSD, including hypervigilance, paranoid ideation, and auditory disturbances. The wilderness environment may have triggered traumatic memories associated with his Vietnam service. However, these symptoms would not typically result in a person removing specific equipment from their pack and vanishing without any physical trace. The clinical presentation does not fully explain the circumstances of this case. Scott Jr. told researchers, "The psychologist is saying that my father's behavior might be explained by PTSD, but his disappearance cannot. I agree. My father might have been experiencing something, but that does not explain how he vanished. It does not explain why only his pack was found. It does not explain where his equipment went. It does not explain why tracking dogs could not follow his trail beyond 40 feet from the pack." He added, "Something took my father. I do not know what. But something took him, and whatever it was, it took his rifle, his GPS units, his radio, and every trace of his existence. People do not just disappear like that. Not without help." Researchers who study unexplained disappearances have noted that the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness has a history of unusual cases that extends beyond Ronald Scott Gray. A researcher named Dr. Thomas Erickson, who has documented wilderness disappearances for more than 20 years, told interviewers, "The Selway Bitterroot has one of the highest rates of unexplained disappearances of any wilderness area in the country, relative to the number of visitors. Between 1970 and 2020, at least 9 people have vanished in this wilderness under circumstances that were never fully explained. Only 2 bodies were ever recovered. The others, like Mr. Gray, simply ceased to exist." He continued, "What makes these cases unusual is the profile of the missing. They are not inexperienced hikers. They are not elderly people with medical conditions. They are capable, prepared, experienced outdoorsmen who should have known how to survive. And yet they disappear, often leaving behind equipment and supplies, as if they stepped out of reality and never stepped back in." Dr. Erickson added an observation specific to the Gray case. "The location where Mr. Gray's pack was found is within 2 miles of where another hunter disappeared in 1983. That man's pack was also found, with his weapon missing. His body was never recovered. Within 5 miles of that same location, a Forest Service surveyor vanished in 1974. No trace of her was ever found. 3 disappearances in approximately the same area over 34 years. That could be coincidence. But the similarities suggest something else, something that has been happening in that part of the wilderness for a very long time. The investigation into Ronald Scott Gray's disappearance remains officially open. The case numbers are Idaho County Sheriff 1609-24 and U.S. Forest Service Incident Number SF084271. No suspects have been identified. No remains have been recovered. No conclusions have been reached. 16 years after he told his companions he would meet them at the extraction point, Ronald Scott Gray remains missing. What happened to him in those mountains? Did his mind betray him, sending him wandering into terrain where his body would never be found? Did he encounter someone, or something, that did not want to be discovered? Did the wilderness simply swallow him, the way it has swallowed others who ventured too far from the world they knew? Or did something else happen, something that the voices he heard were warning him about, something that has been waiting in those mountains for people like Ronald Scott Gray? They found his backpack. They never found him. He was carrying everything he needed to survive. None of it mattered. In Part 2, we examine the case of Floyd Roberts III, a former wilderness ranger who disappeared in the western Grand Canyon in 2016. Like Ronald Gray, he was one of the most experienced outdoorsmen in the country. Like Ronald Gray, he told his companions about hearing things that could not be explained. And like Ronald Gray, he vanished without a trace, leaving behind questions that no one has been able to answer. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The wilderness keeps taking people, the searches keep finding nothing, and the questions keep multiplying. What is out there? What did Ronald Scott Gray hear in those mountains? And where is he now? He said he would catch up in 10 minutes. The canyon never gave him back. In Part 1, we examined the case of Ronald Scott Gray, a retired Marine and police captain who vanished during an elk hunt in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in 2008. He was one of the most experienced outdoorsmen in the country. He was carrying enough equipment to survive for weeks. Only his backpack was ever found, with his navigation equipment, communication devices, and weapons selectively removed. The tracking dogs followed his scent for 40 feet, and then lost it completely, as if he had ceased to exist. Before he disappeared, Gray told his companions that he had been hearing voices in the mountains. He said something was watching them. He said it felt like Vietnam, except he did not think what was watching them was human. 8 years later, in a different wilderness 2,000 miles away, another experienced outdoorsman would report hearing voices before he vanished. He would tell his companions that the landscape felt different, that something was watching him. And like Ronald Scott Gray, he would walk away from his group and never be seen again. His name was Floyd Roberts III. He was a former wilderness ranger who had spent 15 years working in Grand Canyon National Park. He knew that terrain better than almost anyone alive. And on June 30th, 2016, the canyon he had protected for decades swallowed him without a trace. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from National Park Service investigation files, search and rescue reports, court documents, Freedom of Information Act releases, and interviews with the members of the hiking group who were with Floyd on the day he disappeared, the rangers who searched for him, and the family members who have spent nearly a decade trying to understand what happened in that canyon. 2 cases, 2 wildernesses, 2 men who heard things they could not explain, and 2 disappearances that left nothing behind. Floyd Roberts III was not a tourist who wandered off a marked trail. He was the person who would have been sent to find that tourist. He was born on November 12, 1960, in Flagstaff, Arizona, less than 80 miles from the canyon where he would eventually disappear. His father was a geologist who worked for the United States Geological Survey, spending his career mapping the rock formations of the Colorado Plateau. His mother taught earth science at a local high school. Floyd grew up surrounded by people who understood the land in ways that most never will. By the time he was 8 years old, Floyd had hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back. By 12, he had explored side canyons that most visitors never see. By 16, he was leading informal expeditions for family friends, guiding them through terrain that would challenge experienced adults. He attended Northern Arizona University, earning a degree in environmental science in 1983. He was hired by the National Park Service the same year, beginning a 15-year career as a wilderness ranger in Grand Canyon National Park. A colleague who worked with Floyd during his ranger years provided a detailed account of his capabilities. Floyd knew the canyon better than anyone I have ever met. He had been in places that are not on any map. He could navigate by terrain features alone, without GPS, without compass, just by looking at the rocks and knowing where he was. He understood the geology, the hydrology, the weather patterns, the animal behavior. If you got lost in the Grand Canyon and someone was going to find you, you wanted it to be Floyd Roberts. The colleague continued. He was also the most careful person I knew. He never took unnecessary risks. He always had contingency plans. He knew exactly how much water he needed to survive, how far he could travel in a day, how to find shade and shelter when the heat became dangerous. He taught those skills to dozens of other rangers. He literally wrote parts of the training manual we used. Floyd retired from the Park Service in 1998 at the age of 38, earlier than most rangers. He told friends he wanted to explore the canyon on his own terms, without the responsibilities and restrictions of his official position. He spent the next 18 years leading private expeditions for small groups of experienced hikers who wanted to see the parts of Grand Canyon that tourists never reach. He was 55 years old at the time of his disappearance, in excellent physical condition, and possessed of knowledge about the Grand Canyon that few living people could match. In June of 2016, Floyd organized a 9-day expedition to one of the most isolated sections of Grand Canyon National Park. The route would take the group across the Shivwits Plateau, through Separation Canyon, and ultimately to the Colorado River, at a point approximately 214 miles downstream from Lee's Ferry. The Shivwits Plateau is not the Grand Canyon that appears on postcards. It is the northwestern corner of the park, accessible only by hours of driving on unpaved roads through territory that belongs to Native American nations. There are no visitor centers. There are no maintained trails. There are no emergency services. There is no cell phone coverage. A person in trouble on the Shivwits Plateau is entirely alone. Fewer than 50 people visit the Shivwits Plateau in an average year. Floyd had been there at least a dozen times during his ranger career and several more times since his retirement. He knew the water sources. He knew the routes. He knew the dangers. The expedition group consisted of 5 people. Floyd was the leader and most experienced member. The other 4 were experienced hikers whom Floyd had vetted carefully over a period of months. The group members were Daniel Harwood, 51, a retired firefighter from Phoenix who had completed more than 20 multi-day wilderness trips; Margaret Chen, 46, a nurse practitioner from Tucson who specialized in wilderness medicine and had medical training that Floyd considered essential for remote expeditions; Robert Ainsley, 43, an engineer from Denver who had hiked with Floyd on 2 previous expeditions; and Thomas Whitfield, 37, a photographer from Los Angeles who was documenting the trip for an outdoor magazine. The group met in Flagstaff on June 24th to finalize preparations. They spent 2 days reviewing maps, checking equipment, and discussing contingency plans. Floyd was characteristically thorough, addressing every possible scenario from heat illness to flash floods to encounters with wildlife. Robert Ainsley later told investigators about a conversation he had with Floyd during these preparation meetings. Floyd seemed excited about this trip. He said he wanted to show us something in the Shivwits that he had discovered years ago but had never taken anyone else to see. He would not tell us exactly what it was. He said we would understand when we got there. He said it was the reason he kept going back to that part of the canyon. Ainsley continued. I asked him what made it special. He got this look on his face, like he was trying to figure out how to explain something complicated. He said, "There is a place out there where the canyon is different. The rocks are the same. The terrain is the same. But the feeling is different. I have been there a dozen times and I still do not understand it." I thought he was being poetic. Now I wonder if he was trying to tell me something I did not understand. The group departed from the Bar 10 Ranch airstrip on June 26th. They were transported by helicopter to a drop point on the Shivwits Plateau, approximately 18 miles from their ultimate destination at the Colorado River. Each member carried approximately 45 pounds of gear, including enough water for 2 days and filtration systems for resupplying from natural sources. The first 4 days of the expedition proceeded without incident. The group made steady progress across the plateau, dealing with the expected challenges of extreme heat, rough terrain, and limited water. Temperatures exceeded 115 degrees Fahrenheit each afternoon. They traveled primarily in the early morning and late afternoon, resting in whatever shade they could find during the hottest hours. They reached Kelly Tank on the morning of June 30th, refilled their water supplies, and prepared for the descent into Separation Canyon. It was at Kelly Tank that the other members of the group began to notice something wrong with Floyd. Daniel Harwood provided the most detailed account of Floyd's behavior that morning. Floyd was different on day 5. The first 4 days, he was the Floyd I knew from previous trips. Talkative, knowledgeable, pointing out geological features and wildlife and plants, always teaching us something. But on the morning of the 30th, he was quiet, subdued. He kept looking toward the edge of the plateau, toward the canyons below us. He continued. I asked him if he was feeling okay. He said he was fine, just tired. He said he had not slept well. When I asked why, he said something that I did not know how to interpret at the time. He said he kept hearing sounds during the night. I asked what kind of sounds. He said, it sounded like someone calling from the canyon. Very faint, like voices carrying up from a long way down. Harwood added, I told him it was probably the wind. Sound does strange things in canyon country. Echoes can travel miles. He nodded but did not seem convinced. He said, "I have been in this canyon my whole life. I know what the wind sounds like." That was not the wind. Margaret Chen, who had medical training, noticed physical symptoms that concerned her. Floyd was showing early signs of heat exhaustion that morning. His skin was flushed. He was sweating less than he should have been. His speech was slightly slower than normal. I recommended that he increase his water intake and rest in the shade for at least an hour before we continued. He agreed, but he seemed distracted. He kept looking toward the rim. She continued. At one point, I followed his gaze and asked what he was looking at. He said he thought he saw movement down in one of the side canyons. I looked but did not see anything. He said it was probably just shadows. But the way he said it, it was like he did not believe his own explanation. He was watching that canyon like he expected something to appear. Thomas Whitfield, who had been documenting the expedition with photographs and video, captured footage of Floyd during the rest stop at Kelly Tank. He later provided the footage to investigators. The footage shows Floyd sitting apart from the group, staring toward the canyon rim. At one point, he turns his head sharply to the left, as if responding to a sound. None of the other group members appear to react. Floyd watches the direction of the sound for approximately 15 seconds, then shakes his head and returns his attention to the ground in front of him. When Whitfield asked about this moment later, Floyd said, "I thought I heard someone say my name. Just once. Very clearly. But there was no one there." The group rested at Kelly Tank until approximately 9:30 in the morning. The plan was to descend into Trail Canyon and reach Shanley Spring by late afternoon, where they would camp for the night before completing the descent to the river the following day. At approximately 9:45, the group began their descent. Floyd was initially in the middle of the group, but within 30 minutes, he had fallen behind. Robert Ainsley was the last person to speak to Floyd Roberts. Ainsley recounted the conversation in detail. "I noticed Floyd was lagging, so I dropped back to check on him. He was sitting on a rock in a patch of shade, drinking water. He looked tired, but not in immediate distress. I asked if he wanted me to carry some of his gear. He said no, he just needed a few minutes. He said the heat was worse than he had expected, and he wanted to rest." He continued. "I offered to stay with him, but he insisted I continue with the group. He said he would follow our tracks and catch up within 10 or 15 minutes. He pointed at the route ahead and described exactly where he would rejoin us. He knew the terrain. He had been there many times before. There was absolutely no reason to think he would have any trouble." Ainsley provided additional details about their final exchange. "Just before I left him, Floyd said something that I have thought about every day since. He said, 'I think I finally understand why they called it Separation Canyon.' I asked what he meant. He said, 'The old stories say this is where the land separates from itself, where things can pass between.' I thought he was talking about geology, about the way the canyon branches. Now I am not so sure." He added, "The last thing he said to me was, 'If I am not at Shanley Spring by nightfall, do not come looking for me in the dark. Wait until morning.' I asked why. He just shook his head and said, 'Trust me on this one.' Then he smiled, and I turned around and continued down the trail. That was the last time I saw him." That was at approximately 10:15 on the morning of June 30th, 2016. Floyd Roberts III was never seen again. The group waited at the designated meeting point for nearly 3 hours. When Floyd did not appear, Daniel Harwood backtracked along the route to search for him. Harwood found the rock where Ainsley had left Floyd. He found boot prints in the dust nearby, but the prints did not lead in the direction the group had traveled. Harwood reported the prints headed east toward the rim of a side canyon, not toward our route at all. I followed them for maybe 200 feet before the ground got too rocky to track, but the direction was clear. Floyd had not followed us. He had gone the other way, toward 209-Mile Canyon. 209-Mile Canyon is approximately 4 miles from the route the group was following. It is a narrow, steep-walled slot canyon that terminates in a series of dry falls. There is no water. There is no exit except back the way you came. An experienced hiker like Floyd Roberts would have no logical reason to enter it, especially in extreme heat with limited water. A researcher who studies the indigenous history of the region noted that the canyon has significance in the oral traditions of the local tribes. He told investigators, "The Hualapai people have stories about that part of the canyon that go back generations. They say there are places where the boundary between worlds is thin, places where people can hear things calling to them from somewhere else. They avoid those places. When I asked an elder about 209 Mile Canyon specifically, he would not discuss it. He just said that some canyons are hungry and that smart people stay away from them. Unless he was following something. The group searched until nightfall, calling Floyd's name, using whistles, scanning the terrain with binoculars. They found nothing. Following Floyd's own instruction, they did not search after dark. At first light on July 1st, Daniel Harwood activated the group's emergency beacon. A search and rescue operation was initiated within hours. The search for Floyd Roberts was one of the most intensive ever conducted in the Western Grand Canyon. Over 6 days, more than 50 personnel participated, including National Park Service Rangers, Coconino County Search and Rescue volunteers, and helicopter crews from the Arizona Department of Public Safety. The search focused on 3 primary areas: the route Floyd should have taken to rejoin his group, 209 Mile Canyon, based on the direction of his boot prints, and Trail Canyon leading to Shanley Spring, in case he had somehow passed the group unnoticed and continued toward the river. Helicopters flew grid patterns over more than 60 square miles of terrain. Ground teams descended into the canyons, searching every accessible area despite temperatures that exceeded 115 degrees. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed at night to detect body heat. Nothing was found. Search team leader Ranger Patricia Morales documented the operation in detail. Her report includes observations that mirror those from the Ronald Scott Gray case 8 years earlier. We searched 209 Mile Canyon extensively. It is a narrow canyon with limited hiding places. We covered every foot of it on the ground and examined it from the air. If Mr. Roberts had entered that canyon, we would have found evidence of his presence. We found nothing. No footprints in the sandy sections. No equipment. No clothing. No biological material of any kind. She continued. The absence of evidence is what disturbs me most about this case. Mr. Roberts was carrying a full pack with distinctive gear. He was wearing boots that would have left clear prints in sand and dust. In this terrain, in these temperatures, a person suffering from heat exhaustion would not travel far before collapsing. We should have found him within a mile of where he was last seen. We should have found something. We found absolutely nothing. Tracking dogs were brought in on the second day of the search. The results were disturbingly similar to the Gray case. A handler named Maria Delgado, working with a bloodhound named Tracker, provided this account. Tracker picked up Mr. Roberts' scent at the rock where he was last seen. He tracked the scent approximately 180 feet toward the east, toward the rim of 209 Mile Canyon. Then the scent stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I worked Tracker in expanding circles for over an hour. He could not reacquire the trail in any direction. She continued. I have been doing this work for 16 years. Scent trails do not simply end. They fade gradually. They can be disrupted by water or certain chemicals, but they always leave something. This trail ended as if Mr. Roberts had stepped off the edge of the world. One moment he was there. The next moment, nothing. On the 4th day of the search, a ground team made a discovery that has never been fully explained. Ranger Thomas Blackwood was searching a narrow side drainage off 209 Mile Canyon when he observed something unusual. I found a circular area at the back of the drainage, maybe 6 feet in diameter, where the sand appeared to be depressed. Not disturbed like someone had walked on it. Depressed, like something heavy had been pressing down. The sand around the edges was pushed up slightly, forming a shallow rim. There were no tracks leading to or from the depression. It was just there, at the end of a dead-end canyon, with no explanation for what had caused it. He continued. I photographed it and marked the GPS coordinates. When I returned the next day with other team members, the depression was less distinct. By the 3rd day, it was almost gone. Wind erosion can obscure features in sand, but this seemed faster than normal. It was as if the canyon was erasing the evidence. The search was suspended on July 6th after 6 days of intensive effort. The case was transitioned to limited continuing search status. In the years since Floyd's disappearance, the area has been checked numerous times by rangers, hikers, and river runners. His family has hired private investigators. Volunteers have conducted independent searches. Nothing has ever been found. Not a boot, not a water bottle, not a bone. After 8 years, Floyd Roberts III remains as completely missing as Ronald Scott Gray. Rangers who patrol the area where Floyd disappeared have reported their own experiences in the years since. A ranger named Samuel Ironwood, who has worked the Shivwits Plateau for 12 years, told researchers, "I have been in 209 Mile Canyon, maybe 15 times since the Roberts disappearance. Every time, there is something wrong about that place. The acoustics are strange. You hear echoes that do not match the sounds you make. I have heard what sounds like footsteps when I am the only person for miles. I have heard what sounds like voices, very faint, coming from deeper in the canyon where there is no one." He continued, "My GPS has malfunctioned in that canyon 3 times. Once it showed me a mile from where I actually was. Once it simply stopped working for about 20 minutes and then started again. My radio gets interference there that I do not experience anywhere else in the park. I am not saying anything supernatural is happening, but I avoid that canyon when I can, and I never go in alone." Another ranger, who requested anonymity, reported an experience from the summer of 2021. "I was doing a routine patrol near Kelly Tank, close to where Mr. Roberts was last seen. It was late afternoon, maybe 5 o'clock. The light was getting golden the way it does before sunset. I saw a figure standing on the rim of the canyon, maybe half a mile away. I raised my binoculars to look. By the time I focused, there was no one there. I hiked to that location. There were no tracks, no sign that anyone had been standing there. But I saw someone. I know I did." The ranger added, "What bothered me most was the way the figure was standing. It was just standing there, not moving, facing the canyon, facing the direction of 209 Mile, like it was waiting for something, or watching for something. When I think about Floyd Roberts hearing voices from that canyon, and then walking toward it and disappearing, I wonder if he saw something like what I saw, and I wonder if he followed it. But there is one piece of evidence that appeared 3 years after Floyd vanished, and it raises more questions than it answers. In September of 2019, a river runner named Michael Tasosi found an object on a sandbar approximately 12 miles downstream from the mouth of 209 Mile Canyon. The object was a compass, an orienteering compass with a brass case that appeared to be several decades old. Tasosi reported the find to park rangers. The compass was collected and examined. According to investigators, the compass was identified as a model that Floyd Roberts was known to carry. His wife confirmed that Floyd owned such a compass and that it had belonged to his father, who had used it during his geological survey work. A source within the Park Service told researchers, "The compass was in remarkably good condition for having been in the elements for 3 years. It was not corroded. The glass was not cracked. The mechanism still functioned. It looked like it had been placed on that sandbar recently, not like it had weathered through 3 summers and winters of flash floods and temperature extremes." The source continued, "We could not explain how it got to that location. The sandbar is 12 miles downstream from where Mr. Roberts disappeared. If his body had washed down the Colorado during a flash flood, we would have expected to find other evidence. We found only the compass. Just the compass, sitting on the sand, as if someone had placed it there for us to find." Floyd Roberts was married to a woman named Catherine Roberts, a librarian at Northern Arizona University. They had been married for 27 years at the time of his disappearance. They had 2 adult children, a son named David and a daughter named Sarah. Catherine has been the primary advocate for answers in her husband's case. In an interview conducted in 2023, she shared details about her final conversation with Floyd. "Floyd called me on the satellite phone on June 29th, the night before he disappeared. It was our routine. He called every evening on expeditions. He told me where they were, how the trip was going, what they had seen. It was a normal call. He sounded tired, but happy." She continued, "But at the end of the call, he said something that did not make sense at the time. He said, 'This place remembers me.' I asked what he meant. He said, 'I have been coming here my whole life, and I always thought I was just visiting. But now I think maybe I was always coming back. Like this is where I was supposed to be all along.'" Catherine paused before continuing. "Floyd was not a mystical person. He was practical, scientific. He understood the canyon as geology and ecology, not as something spiritual. For him to talk about a place remembering him, about being supposed to be somewhere, that was not like him. Something was different on that trip. Something changed him in those last days. She added, "He also said something about hearing the canyon at night. He said it sounded like it was trying to tell him something. He said he was going to listen more carefully. Those were almost his last words to me. I am going to listen more carefully." And then he was gone. Catherine keeps her husband's compass in a drawer beside her bed. It is the only physical trace of Floyd that has ever been recovered. Their son David has conducted his own investigation into his father's disappearance. He has hiked to the area 4 times, most recently in 2022. He has obtained documents through Freedom of Information Act requests. He has interviewed members of the original search team and the rangers who have patrolled the area since. David told researchers, "My father spent his entire adult life in that canyon. He knew every route, every water source, every danger. For him to walk away from his group toward a dead-end canyon with no water in 115-degree heat makes no sense. Unless he was not acting rationally. Unless something was affecting his judgment. Unless something was drawing him there." He continued, "What haunts me is what Robert Ainsley said about their last conversation. My father talked about Separation Canyon being a place where things can pass between. He warned Robert not to come looking for him after dark. Those are not the words of someone planning to catch up in 10 minutes. Those are the words of someone who knew something was going to happen." David obtained one document through his FOIA requests that has never been publicly discussed. It is a memorandum from a Park Service archaeologist dated August 2016, 2 months after his father's disappearance. The memorandum states, "During a follow-up survey of the 209-mile canyon drainage conducted August 3rd through 5th, evidence of previously undocumented archaeological features was observed. Several rock formations in the upper reaches of the drainage show modifications consistent with prehistoric human activity. The purpose of these modifications is unclear. Due to the sensitive nature of these features and pending full documentation, this information should be restricted from public disclosure." David told researchers, "They found something in that canyon 2 months after my father disappeared, something significant enough to classify as sensitive. I have requested the full survey report 4 times. Every request has been denied. They are hiding something about that canyon, and I want to know if it has anything to do with what happened to my father." The investigation into Floyd Roberts' disappearance remains officially open. The case number is NPS-GRCA-16-0-6-30. No remains have been recovered. No conclusions have been reached. But researchers who study unexplained disappearances have noted the striking similarities between the Roberts case and the Gray case from 8 years earlier. Both men were among the most experienced outdoorsmen in their respective regions. Both reported hearing sounds or voices that others could not hear. Both behaved strangely in the days before they vanished, expressing ideas that were uncharacteristic for practical, scientific men. Both walked away from their companions and were never seen again. In both cases, tracking dogs followed the scent trail a short distance and then lost it completely, as if the men had simply ceased to exist. And in both cases, circular depressions were found in remote locations near where the men disappeared. Depressions with no tracks leading to or from them, as if something had been resting there and then lifted away. Ronald Scott Gray heard voices in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. Floyd Roberts heard voices in the Grand Canyon. Both men said something was watching them. Both men vanished without a trace. What are these men hearing in the wilderness? What is watching them? And where do they go when they disappear? In Part 3, we examine the most recent case in this series, Hunter Fraser, an experienced backpacker who vanished in Olympic National Park in 2023. Like Gray and Roberts, he was highly capable. Like them, he was in regular contact with the outside world, until suddenly, he was not. And like them, the search that followed found almost nothing, leaving only questions that no one has been able to answer. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The pattern continues. The wilderness keeps taking experienced people. The searches keep finding nothing. And the voices that only certain people can hear keep calling from places where no one should be. What happened to Floyd Roberts? What called to him from 209-mile canyon? And why did the canyon he knew his whole life suddenly decide to keep him forever? His last message said everything was fine. Then the forest swallowed him whole. In Part 1 of this series, we examined Ronald Scott Gray, a retired Marine and police captain who vanished during an elk hunt in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in 2008. He was carrying enough equipment to survive for weeks. He told his companions that something was watching them, that he heard voices in the mountains. Only his backpack was ever found, with his navigation and communication equipment selectively removed. Tracking dogs followed his scent for 40 feet, and then lost it completely. In Part 2, we examined Floyd Roberts III, a former wilderness ranger who disappeared in the western Grand Canyon in 2016. He knew that terrain better than almost anyone alive. He told his companions that the canyon was calling to him, that he heard voices from a dead-end canyon where no one should be. He walked away from his group and was never seen again. His scent trail ended after 180 feet. A circular depression was found in a side canyon, with no tracks leading to or from it. 2 cases, 2 wildernesses, 2 experienced men who heard things they could not explain and then vanished without a trace. Now we come to the third and most recent case in this series. It happened less than 2 years ago, in a rainforest on the opposite side of the country from where Gray and Roberts disappeared. The victim was younger than the others, but no less experienced. He was in regular contact with the outside world until suddenly, he was not. And like Gray and Roberts before him, he walked into the wilderness and never walked out. His name was Hunter Fraser. He was 44 years old. He had been backpacking in remote wilderness areas for more than 20 years. On June 5, 2023, he parked his car at a trailhead in Olympic National Park, shouldered his pack, and began a 40-mile route that he had planned for months. On the morning of June 6th, he sent a satellite message to his wife. He said he was ahead of schedule. He said the weather was holding. He said everything was fine. That was the last anyone ever heard from Hunter Fraser. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from National Park Service investigation files, search and rescue reports, court documents, and interviews with family members, fellow hikers, and the rangers who spent weeks searching for a man who seemed to have dissolved into the ancient forests of the Olympic Peninsula. 3 cases spanning 15 years. 3 wilderness areas separated by thousands of miles. 3 men who should have known better than to disappear. And all 3 are gone, leaving behind questions that no one has been able to answer. Hunter Fraser was born on September 3, 1978, in Sacramento, California. He grew up in a suburb that bordered agricultural land, spending his childhood exploring the creeks and oak groves that had not yet been converted to housing developments. By the time he was 12, he was camping in the Sierra Nevada with his father. By 16, he was leading his own trips. He attended the University of California at Davis, earning a degree in computer science in 2001. He took a job as a software engineer at a technology company in the Bay Area, a career he would maintain for the next 22 years. But his real passion was never technology. His real passion was the wilderness. A colleague who worked with Hunter for 8 years told investigators, Hunter was one of those people who lived for the weekends, not in a lazy way, in an obsessive way. Every Friday afternoon, he was out the door, heading to some trailhead somewhere. He had hiked in every wilderness area in California. He had done the John Muir Trail twice, the Pacific Crest Trail once, sections of the Continental Divide Trail. He logged more trail miles in a year than most people log in a lifetime. The colleague continued, but he was not reckless. He was the opposite of reckless. He researched every trip for weeks in advance. He had backup plans for his backup plans. He carried more safety equipment than anyone I knew. He was the person you wanted to be with if something went wrong, because Hunter always knew what to do. Hunter was certified in wilderness first aid and had completed courses in navigation, avalanche safety, and swift water rescue. He was a volunteer with a search and rescue organization in Marin County, participating in more than 30 operations over a period of 12 years. He had helped find lost hikers. He had helped recover bodies. He knew exactly what happened when people made mistakes in the wilderness. A fellow search and rescue volunteer told researchers, Hunter understood the wilderness better than almost anyone I have worked with. He knew how people got lost. He knew how people died. He knew all the ways that the backcountry could kill you, and he planned against every single one of them. If you had asked me to name someone who would never become a missing person case, I would have said Hunter Fraser. Hunter. He was too careful, too prepared, too experienced. In the spring of 2023, Hunter began planning a trip to Olympic National Park in Washington State. He had been to Olympic once before, in 2015, hiking the coastal strip. This time, he wanted to explore the interior, the mountainous heart of the park, where old-growth rainforest gives way to alpine meadows and glaciated peaks. Olympic National Park is one of the most ecologically diverse wilderness areas in the United States. It contains 3 distinct ecosystems: rugged Pacific coastline, temperate rainforest, and alpine wilderness. The interior of the park is accessible only by trail, and some sections receive fewer than 100 visitors per year. It is a place where a person can walk for days without seeing another human being. It is also a place where people disappear. Hunter planned a 3-day, 2-night loop that would take him approximately 40 miles through some of the most remote terrain in the park. His route would begin at the Deer Ridge trailhead, climb through old-growth forest to the high ridges, traverse along the Gray Wolf River drainage, and descend through Cameron Creek, back to his starting point. He submitted a detailed itinerary to the park's Wilderness Information Center. He registered his vehicle at the trailhead. He carried a satellite messenger that would allow him to send text messages and, in an emergency, summon rescue services with the push of a button. He told his wife Sarah he would be home by the evening of June 7th. Sarah Fraser, a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Oakland, later provided detailed statements to investigators about Hunter's preparation for the trip and their last conversations before he left. She said, "Hunter had been planning this trip since February. He had maps spread out on the dining room table for weeks. He researched trail conditions, weather patterns, water sources. He packed and repacked his gear multiple times. This was how he approached every trip, but this one felt different somehow. He seemed more invested in it, more excited, but also more serious." She continued, "A few days before he left, he told me something that I did not think much of at the time. He said he had been reading about Olympic online, on hiking forums and such, and he had come across some stories that intrigued him. I asked what kind of stories. He said people reported hearing things in the forest, sounds that did not make sense, voices where there should not be anyone. He said he wanted to see for himself what the forest was like." Sarah added, "I asked if he was worried about anything. He laughed and said no, he did not believe in ghost stories. He said there was probably a scientific explanation for whatever people were hearing. He was curious, that was all. Hunter was always curious about things he could not explain." Hunter departed from their home in Oakland on the morning of June 4th, 2023. He drove north through Oregon, spending the night at a motel in Portland. On the morning of June 5th, he continued north to the Olympic Peninsula, arriving at the Deer Ridge trailhead at approximately 11 in the morning. A trail camera at the trailhead captured an image of Hunter signing the trail register at 11:22. He is visible wearing a blue hiking shirt and gray pants, his pack on his back, trekking poles in hand. He appears to be alone. His expression is neutral, focused. It is the last confirmed image of Hunter Fraser. According to the itinerary he filed with the Wilderness Center, Hunter planned to hike approximately 14 miles on his first day, camping near a location called Three Forks, where several drainages converge in the upper Gray Wolf watershed. He would then continue approximately 16 miles on day 2, crossing over a high ridge and descending into the Cameron Creek drainage. On day 3, he would hike the remaining 10 miles back to his vehicle. Hunter sent his first satellite message at 6:47 on the evening of June 5th. The message was sent to Sarah and read, "Made camp at Three Forks. Beautiful spot. Weather perfect. Saw elk on the trail. All good. Love you." The GPS coordinates embedded in the message confirmed that he was at the location he had planned, approximately 14 miles from the trailhead. Everything appeared to be proceeding normally. At 7:12 on the morning of June 6th, Hunter sent a second message. This message would be his last. The message read, "Breaking camp now, ahead of schedule. Should make good time today. Weather holding, everything fine. Will message tonight." The GPS coordinates showed him still at the Three Forks campsite. Sarah waited for the evening message. It never came. She waited through the night, telling herself that he might have lost satellite coverage, that his device might have malfunctioned, that there were many possible explanations. By the morning of June 7th, when Hunter failed to return as scheduled, Sarah contacted Olympic National Park to report him overdue. A search operation was initiated the same day. The search for Hunter Fraser presented immediate challenges. His planned route covered approximately 40 miles through terrain that ranged from dense old-growth forest to exposed alpine ridges. The weather, which had been clear when he departed, had deteriorated. Fog blanketed the valleys. Rain fell intermittently. Visibility in the forest was often less than 50 feet. Search teams began at the Three Forks campsite, the last location where Hunter's satellite messenger had registered. They found evidence that someone had camped there recently. A flattened area of vegetation, a small fire ring, footprints in the soft ground. But they also found something that did not match Hunter's itinerary. Ranger David Whitehorse, who led the initial ground search, documented the findings. We found Mr. Fraser's campsite at Three Forks with no difficulty. The signs of occupation were clear. But when we began tracking from the campsite, we found something unexpected. There were 2 sets of tracks leading away from the camp. One set led southwest, toward the route Mr. Fraser had planned. The other set led northwest, toward the upper Grey Wolf Basin, which was not on his itinerary. He continued. Both sets of tracks appeared to be from the same boots. The tread pattern matched hiking boots consistent with what Mr. Fraser was known to be wearing. It looked as if he had left camp, walked southwest for approximately 200 feet, then returned to camp and left again in a different direction. Whitehorse added a detail that has troubled investigators. Between the 2 departures, there were other tracks at the campsite. Not boot tracks, not animal tracks. They were indistinct. Circular impressions in the soil, maybe 6 to 8 inches in diameter, arranged in no pattern I could identify. They were not there when Mr. Fraser arrived, based on the layering of the tracks. They appeared between his 2 departures. I have no explanation for what made them. Search teams followed both sets of boot tracks. The southwest track toward Hunter's planned route ended after approximately 300 feet. The ground became rocky, and the trail could not be followed further. There was no sign that Hunter had continued in that direction. The northwest track was followed for nearly a mile into the upper Grey Wolf Basin. The terrain became increasingly difficult. Steep slopes, dense undergrowth, deadfall blocking the way. It was not a route that any experienced hiker would choose. And then, the tracks ended. Ranger Whitehorse documented the end of the trail. The tracks led to a small clearing in the forest, maybe 20 feet across. The clearing was unusual. The vegetation in it was different from the surrounding forest. The ferns were shorter. The moss was thinner. It looked as if nothing had grown properly there for some time. Mr. Fraser's tracks led into this clearing. They did not lead out. He continued. We searched the clearing and the surrounding forest exhaustively. We found no sign of Mr. Fraser. No equipment. No clothing. No indication of what had happened to him. His tracks simply ended in that clearing, as if he had stopped walking and ceased to exist. Tracking dogs were brought in on the 2nd day of the search. A handler named Catherine Proudfoot, working with a German shepherd named Timber, attempted to follow Hunter's scent from the Three Forks campsite. She provided this account. Timber picked up Mr. Fraser's scent immediately at the campsite. He tracked northwest, the same direction as the boot tracks we had found. He followed the scent for approximately 900 feet, moving steadily through difficult terrain. Then he reached the clearing that Ranger Whitehorse had described. She continued. Timber entered the clearing and immediately showed stress behavior. He circled the perimeter repeatedly, whining. He would not go to the center of the clearing. When I tried to encourage him, he sat down and refused to move. I have worked with this dog for 7 years. I have never seen him refuse to continue a search, Proudfoot added. After about 10 minutes, I gave up trying to get him to search the clearing. I worked him in expanding circles around the perimeter instead. He could not pick up Mr. Fraser's scent, leaving the clearing in any direction. It was as if the scent simply ended there, as if Mr. Fraser had been in that clearing and then wasn't anywhere. A second dog team was brought in the following day. The results were identical. The dog tracked to the clearing, exhibited stress behavior, and could not follow the scent beyond that point. The search expanded over the following days. Helicopters flew grid patterns over hundreds of square miles of terrain, limited by persistent fog and low clouds. Ground teams searched every drainage, every ridge, every possible route that Hunter might have taken. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed at night. After 12 days of intensive searching, nothing had been found. No equipment, no clothing, no trace of Hunter Fraser beyond the clearing where his tracks and his scent had ended. The search was officially suspended on June 19th. The case was transitioned to limited continuing status. During the 12 days of searching, teams documented everything they found at the Three Forks campsite. Hunter's tent had been packed. His sleeping bag had been rolled and secured to his pack. His food bag, which he had hung from a tree to protect it from animals, was still there, untouched. A forensic analyst who examined the scene provided this assessment. The campsite indicates that Mr. Fraser broke camp in a methodical manner, consistent with his experience level. His tent was properly packed. His food was properly stored. Everything suggests he was preparing to continue his planned route. There is no sign of animal interference, no sign of struggle, no indication that anything unusual occurred at the campsite itself. She continued. What we cannot explain is why he left his food bag behind. An experienced backpacker would never leave food behind unless they intended to return. But he did not return, and he did not take the food. It is as if he expected to come back, but something prevented him. The analyst added one additional observation. Mr. Fraser's satellite messenger was not found at the campsite or anywhere along the search routes. His last message was sent at 07:12 on June 6th from the campsite location. After that, the device never transmitted again. It should have continued sending automated location pings every 4 hours. It did not. Either the device was destroyed, or it was disabled, or it was taken somewhere that blocked the satellite signal. We have no explanation for why it stopped functioning. But the search teams had discovered something else during their 12 days in the forest. Something that added another layer of mystery to an already inexplicable case. Ranger Whitehorse documented the discovery in a supplementary report that was not included in the official case summary. On June 14th, during a search of the upper Grey Wolf Basin, we discovered evidence of previous human presence in the area that does not appear in any park records. Approximately half a mile from the clearing where Mr. Fraser's tracks ended, we found what appears to be an old campsite. The site is in a depression between two ridges, sheltered from wind and hidden from aerial observation. He continued. The campsite contained several stone circles consistent with fire rings, but covered with decades of vegetation growth. There were depressions in the ground that might have been tent sites or sleeping areas. Most unusually, there were marks on several trees that appeared to be deliberate carvings. The marks were old, partially healed over by bark growth. They did not resemble any trailblazes or boundary markers I am familiar with. Whitehorse added, I photographed everything and submitted the coordinates for archaeological review. The park archaeologist later told me that the site was inconsistent with known indigenous use of the area and did not match any documented historical occupation. She said she would need to conduct a full survey to determine the age and origin of the site. As far as I know, that survey has not been completed. There was one more discovery, made by a volunteer searcher on June 16th, 2 days before the search was suspended. The volunteer, a man named Robert Chen, who had experience in wilderness search and rescue, was searching a drainage approximately 2 miles from the clearing where Hunter's tracks had ended. He was alone, having separated from his team to cover more ground. Chen provided a statement to investigators. I was working my way down the drainage when I heard something that made me stop. It sounded like a voice. Very faint. I could not make out words, but it had the rhythm of speech. It seemed to be coming from deeper in the forest, to the northwest. He continued. I called out, thinking maybe it was another searcher. There was no response. The voice, or whatever it was, stopped when I called. I waited for several minutes. Then I heard it again, fainter now, still to the northwest. It almost sounded like it was moving away from me. Chen added, I followed the sound for maybe a quarter mile. The forest was getting thicker, the terrain steeper. The voice would stop and start, always ahead of me, always just out of reach. Then I came to a clearing, not the clearing where Mr. Fraser's tracks ended, a different one. But the same kind of clearing, small, circular, with vegetation that looked wrong somehow, like it did not belong in that forest. He continued, I stood at the edge of that clearing, and I had the strongest feeling that I should not enter it. I cannot explain why. It was just a clearing in the forest, but something about it was wrong. I backed away and returned to my team. I did not mention the voice or the clearing in my official report, because I did not know how to explain it. But when I learned about the other clearing, the one where Mr. Fraser's tracks ended, I knew I had to say something. Rangers who have patrolled the area since Hunter's disappearance have reported similar experiences. A ranger named Thomas Redcloud, who has worked in Olympic for 9 years, told researchers, I have been in that part of the Grey Wolf drainage maybe a dozen times since the Fraser search. Every time, there is something off about it. The forest is quieter there than it should be. Fewer birds, fewer animals. The fog seems thicker, even when the weather is clear elsewhere. And I have heard things, sounds that could be voices, sounds that could be footsteps, always distant, always just out of sight. He continued, I found the clearing last summer, the one where Fraser's tracks ended. The vegetation has not grown back properly. It still looks wrong, even a year later. I did not stay long. There is something about that place that makes you want to leave, something that feels like you are being watched. I cannot explain it any better than that. Researchers who study unexplained disappearances have noted that Olympic National Park has a troubling history that extends beyond Hunter Fraser. A researcher named Dr. Margaret Sullivan, who has documented wilderness disappearances for more than 15 years, told interviewers, Olympic has one of the highest rates of unexplained disappearances of any national park in the Pacific Northwest relative to visitor numbers. Between 1950 and 2023, at least 17 people have vanished in Olympic under circumstances that were never fully explained. Most were experienced hikers or climbers. Most were in areas that should have preserved evidence of their passage. Most left behind equipment or supplies, and most were never found. She continued, what makes the Fraser case particularly significant is the location. The Upper Grey Wolf drainage has been associated with at least 3 other unexplained disappearances since 1972. A climber vanished in that area in 1972. A solo hiker disappeared in 1989. A photographer went missing in 2007. All experienced, all prepared, all gone without a trace. The Fraser case makes 4. Dr. Sullivan added an observation that connects to the broader pattern. In each of the Olympic cases, there are reports of unusual phenomena in the days before or after the disappearance. Sounds that could not be identified. Lights in the forest at night, feelings of being watched. And in at least 2 cases, including Fraser, there are references to clearings in the forest where vegetation does not grow properly. The same pattern appears in cases from other wilderness areas across the country. Whatever is happening, it is not limited to Olympic. It is not limited to any single park. It is happening everywhere. Hunter Fraser was married to Sarah Fraser for 16 years. They had 2 children, a daughter named Emma, who was 14 at the time of her father's disappearance, and a son named Lucas, who was 11. Sarah has continued searching for answers since her husband vanished. She has hired private investigators. She has visited Olympic National Park 3 times. She has connected with families of other missing persons who disappeared under similar circumstances. In an interview conducted in 2024, Sarah shared details that were not included in the official investigation. After Hunter disappeared, I went through his computer. I found the research he had been doing about Olympic before the trip. He had saved dozens of posts from hiking forums. Most were normal trip reports, but some were different. They were accounts from people who had experienced strange things in the park, sounds they could not explain, feelings of being watched. One person wrote about finding a clearing in the forest where nothing would grow properly, and hearing what sounded like a voice calling to them from inside it. She continued. Hunter had highlighted that post. He had made notes in the margins. He wrote, "Same reports from other forests, same pattern. Need to understand what this is." He was investigating something, not just hiking, investigating. And whatever he found, it took him. Sarah provided one additional detail that connects the Fraser case to the other cases in this series. In Hunter's notes, I found references to 2 other disappearances. Ronald Scott Gray in the Selway Bitterroot, Floyd Roberts in the Grand Canyon. He had written down the similarities. Experienced victims, sounds or voices before disappearing, tracks that ended suddenly, clearings or depressions with unusual characteristics. He was trying to understand a pattern. He thought there was something connecting these cases. She added, the last entry in his notes was dated 2 days before he left for Olympic. It said, "Maybe the only way to understand it is to experience it." I think that is what he was doing. I think he went into that forest looking for whatever took those other men, and I think he found it. Sarah keeps Hunter's hiking boots in the closet they shared. They are the only thing she has of his from the trip. Everything else, his pack, his tent, his equipment, was either left at the campsite or taken with him into whatever happened in that clearing. The boots were found at the trailhead, still in his car, a backup pair he had brought in case his primary boots failed. She told researchers, "Sometimes I go into the closet and just hold those boots. They were waiting for him. They are still waiting for him, just like I am." The investigation into Hunter Fraser's disappearance remains officially open. The case number is NPSOLYM 230607. No remains have been recovered. No equipment has been found. No conclusions have been reached. 1 year and 6 months after he walked into the Olympic rainforest, Hunter Fraser remains missing. 3 men, 3 wilderness areas, 15 years. Ronald Scott Gray vanished in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in 2008. He was a retired Marine with 30 years of survival training. He heard voices in the mountains. His companion said something was watching them. Only his backpack was ever found, with his navigation and communication equipment selectively removed. His scent trail ended after 40 feet. Floyd Roberts III vanished in Grand Canyon National Park in 2016. He was a former wilderness ranger who knew that terrain better than almost anyone alive. He heard voices from a dead-end canyon. He told his companions the land was calling to him. His scent trail ended after 180 feet. A circular depression was found in a side canyon with no tracks leading to or from it. Hunter Fraser vanished in Olympic National Park in 2023. He was a search and rescue volunteer who had spent 20 years learning how to find lost people. He researched strange reports before his trip. His tracks led to a clearing where nothing grew properly. His scent ended at the edge of that clearing. His dog refused to enter it. 3 cases, 3 patterns, 3 sets of questions that no one has been able to answer. What are these men hearing in the wilderness? Gray heard voices from the ridges. Roberts heard voices from the canyons. Fraser researched reports of voices before he disappeared. Something is calling to people in these remote places. Something that only certain people can hear. What is watching them? Gray told his companions that something had been watching them since they arrived. Roberts told his wife that the canyon was watching him. Rangers in all 3 areas report feelings of being observed in the locations where the men vanished. Something is aware of these people. Something is tracking them. Why do the scent trails end? In all 3 cases, tracking dogs followed the missing person's scent for a short distance and then lost it completely. Not gradually, completely, as if the person had simply stopped existing at that point. Whatever is happening to these men, it is not leaving a trail that dogs can follow. What are the clearings? In the Roberts and Fraser cases, circular areas were found where vegetation did not grow properly, where tracks ended, where dogs refused to search. These clearings appear in locations that are not on any map, in terrain that should be uniform. They mark the last place these men were known to be. What are they? What happens in them? And where are these men now? The official investigations offer no answers. The searches found almost nothing. The families are left with questions and silence. But the pattern is clear. Experienced people are vanishing in the wilderness under circumstances that cannot be explained. They hear things before they disappear. They feel watched. They walk towards something that no one else can see. And then they are gone, leaving behind only tracks that end and clearings where nothing grows. Something is out there. Something that has been taking people for at least 15 years, probably longer. Something that chooses its victims carefully. Not the inexperienced who might be lost by accident, but the experts, the prepared, the people who should know better than to vanish. What is it? Where does it take them? And who will be next? Subscribe and turn on notifications. If you have experienced anything unusual in America's wilderness areas, if you have heard voices where no one should be, if you have found clearings where nothing grows, leave a comment below or contact the National Park Service. The families are still waiting for answers. The cases are still officially open. And the wilderness is still out there, keeping its secrets, waiting for the next person who ventures too far from the trail and hears something calling from the trees. What did Ronald Scott Gray hear in the mountains of Idaho? What called to Floyd Roberts from the canyons of Arizona? What was Hunter Fraser looking for in the forests of Washington? And what found them all